Well, hey there, and welcome to this online worship experience at Community of Grace Lutheran Church. I am Pastor Josh Pontious, one of the pastors that is serving you here out of Peoria, Arizona. And it is the second week in the epic story of Christmas. And I want to say a special thanks to Pastor Tim for starting us off last week with those prologues, all those stories at the beginning of each of the Gospels that help set up the Christmas story. And so in two of them, he mentioned that it was Jesus coming into this world to establish a kingdom or to re-establish kingdom life in this new kind of way. And that's where we're going to start off today, because when you're establishing a new kingdom, there's naturally going to be a little bit of conflict. The story of Jesus coming into this world, of that baby born in the manger in Bethlehem, starts off with, well, a lot of conflict. There's trouble in this. And a lot of people might be thinking to yourselves right now, how could a baby being born, how can that good news incite conflict? How could that possibly be a problem for anyone? Or even if you go past the baby in the manger, how could a Jewish guy born in Palestine going around healing people and telling people to be kind to one another and to care for the lowly, how could that be a problem for anybody? What's the big deal? Well, I think in some ways it's because we're so far removed from that time and from that place. 2,000 years later, 2,000 years ago, as the Jesus movement was just getting started, we were this ragtag group of upstart new religious people, this little group that was heavily persecuted, and there was lots of violence against us, and it was hard to be a Christ follower. It was really hard. It was dangerous even. And we're so far removed from that now where we are as Christians here, especially in the West. We don't understand just how complicated the time and place, the religious and political landscape was of that time. And this is going to be the first time of really a lot of different times that I'm going to remind you of a really important fact. We as Christians in the church in the West, particularly in North America, we're not a persecuted group. We are not discriminated against. We have it pretty easy. We're actually in positions of pretty important power and authority and influence in our status as church. So in a lot of ways, we're a lot more like the group that we're going to be talking a little bit about today, and it's those Romans that come in at the beginning of this story of Jesus. And so as we begin to look at these Romans, it's good to understand their culture and the times and places. But we hear about a really important Roman, and it comes up at the beginning of Luke's gospel. It's Luke in chapter 2, verse 1. It says, "In those days, a decree went out from Emperor Augustus that all the world should be registered. This was the first registration that was taken while Quirinius was governor of Syria. All went to their own towns to be registered." It's easy to miss some of the really important things that are happening here in this story. So the Emperor Augustus has ordered a census to be taken of the entire Roman Empire. And it's important to note just how vast it is. I've got the numbers right here. At the time, we're looking at between 59 and 76 million people that need to be accounted for. 59 and 76 million people to be counted. And by the end of the first century, right around the time that Jesus was going around, it was this area of 1.5 million square miles. The ability to have the kind of power over that many people, over that much space, even to just take a census, it's so easy to understate how much power was tied up in this emperor. This Emperor Augustus, this man who had grown up trying to get power, he used his power, his influence, his politics, his money, violence, all these tools to try to get ahead and to do these incredible things and to take power of this vast empire. It is absolutely insane to know that this incredibly powerful man was going to come into conflict with a baby in a backwater town in a backwater province. Wait, what? How? Why? What problem could this incredible, powerful person have with a baby and with the movement that this baby was going to start? Well, I am so glad that you asked. Because you see, at the end of the day, just Jesus being who he is a really, really big problem for the emperor. And I'm hoping to explain a little bit why. See, Emperor Augustus, Caesar Augustus, those two powerful names aren't even the names that he's born with. Those are titles that he has picked up along the way. Augustus, it talks about how powerful and important, how august, how just really serene and incredible this person is. He's got this also title of first citizen. He doesn't like king. He doesn't like emperor. He is way, way, way too humble for that. But the title Caesar, that name, it's not one that he had from birth. It's one that he picked up actually in early adulthood. See, his great uncle had been Julius Caesar, and his great uncle had become a dictator of Rome and engaged in all sorts of civil war and all sorts of power grabs, all that violence and all that stuff that we keep talking about here. It's a common recurring theme in the ancient world, actually in the modern world in some ways too. But Julius Caesar had been killed, and when he died, he had put in his will that his great-nephew, Gaius Octavian, would be his heir. So even though Gaius Octavian was practically an adult at the time, he was still going to adopt him. And by adopting him, he gives him all of his power and his influence, all of his political might. He leaves him all of his wealth, all of his money, his titles, his lands, but also gives him his name. It gives Gaius Octavian the right to call himself Caesar and to call Julius Caesar his own father. Not long after Julius Caesar dies, the Roman Senate, the empire's government body, gets together and they vote. And they declare that Julius Caesar, who had just been killed the year before, was going to be deified. In other words, Julius Caesar was a god. And that gives Emperor Augustus Caesar, Gaius Octavian, the right to walk around and say, "My dad was a god." Even through the camera, even through the power of the internet right now, I can almost perceive light bulbs starting to go off above your head as to why there might be just a little bit of conflict. Gaius Octavian, this Caesar Augustus, is calling himself the Son of God. Let's hold on to that for just a moment. Because he doesn't just walk around calling himself the Son of God for no good reason. He puts it on his statues, and he puts it on his coins, and he puts it on his public monuments as a way to kind of say, hey, I'm important. I am so important that my dad was divinity. And because my dad was divinity, that makes me the son of divinity. And that when I am the son of divinity, that means that what I say goes. What I say is important is important. What I say we should do, hey, that's what we should do. He's using this title to sort of amp up his own power. And he's not the only one to do it. His descendants do it as well. The emperors that come after him do it as well. He's using this title. And this Son of God title for the emperor, it's not a religious title in the way that you and I might understand it. It's not something that you can just use as a religious idea. And when you hear Son of God, it has greater implications. And even when we're talking about Jesus, being the Son of God isn't just talking about something religious. That's not what his people would have heard. It's not Jesus calling himself or his followers calling him the Son of God isn't something that's just meant to describe some truth about the Trinity, the aspects of God. When the early Christians hear this title, Son of God, they hear this as a political title. They hear this as a direct thing in opposition to the power of the emperor. There can only be one Son of God at a time. And now you might be seeing where some of the conflict comes into play. It's a bit of an ironic thing that Jesus is born into a time in history called the Pax Romana, the Roman peace, for those of you who don't speak Latin as well as I do. I don't speak Latin well at all. That's a problem for a different day. He's born into a time of relative peace, and his followers are in a time of relative peace. Now, as I said before, there's all sorts of drama, there's persecution, there's violence towards Christians. Even this time of peace isn't really all that peaceful. But of course, we know that history is written by the victors. This Roman peace, though, was the kind of peace that was bought at the tip of the sword, or is bought off and subjugated with power and might and money. This is a peace that always sets up the victor as the good guys and the people who lost as the bad guys. It's about power. It's about domination. It's about making the losers feel not just bad, but make them truly feel like losers, like they could never, ever have power again. The ability to get peace rests solely in your ability to enforce it and to force peace on other people, to subjugate them, to make them feel less than, to make them feel as others, to make them feel just awful, and to just make yourself walk around feeling like, man, we are just so awesome. Isn't it great, this peace that we have won, even after we've murdered and oppressed thousands and thousands of people? That's the way conflict is done in the ancient world. That's the way victory is won. That's the way peace is, both in those days and in a lot of ways now. But Jesus' way, Jesus' peace, Jesus' victory, Jesus' way of doing conflict is, well, it's different. It's not about power and might. It's about a baby born in a manger. It's not about subjugating and making people feel less than. It's about going out and being with the lost, the lowly, the hurt. It's about blessing the poor. It's about lifting up the lowest of the low. It's about knocking people off their high horses of their superiority and hanging out with the sinners and the outcasts. When you do things so radically differently, but hold on to some of those same titles, conflict is just going to happen. These are two radically different worldviews. And they're just not that compatible with one another. They can't be. And the worldviews of back then and the worldviews of today and now are so similar. We take our advice and look for leaders that say, win at all costs. Put yourself and those around you first. Get ahead no matter what. It doesn't matter what they're up to or what they're doing. You focus on you. And if you winning means that they lose, then that's just how it is. That's how it should be. That's how conflict was done and is done. That's how peace was done and is done. But I don't know if that's the way. I don't know if that's what Jesus has in mind when he says this is how we handle conflict. This is how we deal with others. So then the question becomes, who are we going to seek after? Are we going to seek after those leaders, those influencers, those business moguls, or those politicians who keep seeking to other people, to make them feel less than, so that we, the good guys, can get ahead, even when we're not doing so good? Are we going to seek after people who want power, who want to dominate, who want to subjugate? Are we going to keep seeking after those people and those ideas that try to build ourselves up? Is that who we're going to look after? Is that who we're going to seek? Or do we go looking for a babe in a manger? The one who started from nothing and lived like nothing. The one who lived his life in service to others. The one who was willing to be ridiculed, tortured, and killed for our sakes in the worst of ways. Are we going to seek after those who want power? Or are we going to look after one who's willing to give it all away? There can only be one king. There can only be one true leader. There can only be one true Son of God. So who are you going to look for? Can't answer that for you. But I do know that as we continue this journey towards Christmas, I know that as we continue this journey towards Christmas, a lot of us are anticipating that time, that story, that baby born in Bethlehem, the one who would grow up in Nazareth. And yet this season is also recognizing that while Jesus came, he's going to come again. So how do we want to be perceived by the world as we wait for Jesus to come back? Ones who practice radical love and generosity and hospitality, welcoming and loving others? Is that the kind of world we're going to hope Jesus comes back to? Is that what we're going to hope people will see in us? I'd like to hope so. But this journey towards Christmas, this incredible story of Christmas, is going to be epic. And I can't wait to see you next week so we can talk about what comes next.